There is something I've noticed over and over again throughout my life. The harder you try to convince some people, the more they seem to resist you. Have you ever experienced that? You explain something clearly. You make what feels like a perfectly reasonable argument. You stay calm, logical, and you genuinely believe you're trying to help. And somehow, the conversation gets worse. The other person becomes defensive. They stop listening, push back. Sometimes they even move further away from your position than where they started. Now, most people look at that situation and immediately assume the problem is the other person. They're stubborn, they're emotional, they don't listen, they don't want to change. And sometimes that might be true. But what if that's not what's happening? What if the real reason people resist you has nothing to do with stubbornness? What if people resist you because you're trying to influence them before you've understood them? The Stoics understood something about human nature that most people completely miss. People do not act according to reality, they act according to the reality they perceive, and those are not always the same thing. Think about that for a moment, because if two people can look at the exact same situation and come away with completely different conclusions, then influence is not about forcing someone to see what you see. Influence begins with understanding what they see. And this is where most people fail. They assume that because something makes sense to them, it should make sense to everyone else. But that's not how human beings work. Let me give you an example. Imagine two people lose their jobs on the same day. One sees disaster, the other sees opportunity. The event is identical. The meaning is different. One person feels fear, the other feels excitement. One withdraws, the other takes action. Now, if the event is the same, where does the difference come from? It comes from perception, interpretation, and from the story each person tells themselves about what happened. And this doesn't only apply to events, it applies to people. This is where relationships become complicated. Because every conflict begins with an invisible assumption. The assumption that the other person should think the way we think, that they should care about what we care about, that they should value what we value, and when they don't, we become frustrated. We stop trying to understand them, we start trying to correct them. But here's the problem. You cannot effectively influence someone you do not understand. In fact, the less you understand them, the more resistance you create. By the way, I'm curious, as you're listening to this, is there someone specific that comes to mind? A colleague, a partner, a friend, someone you've been struggling to understand? Let me know in the comments, because by the end of this video, I think you'll see them differently. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He constantly reminded himself that people act according to what appears right to them, not according to what appears right to you. And when you really understand that, human behavior starts becoming much easier to read. Take someone who seems obsessed with achievement. You know the type. They're always working, always building, always chasing the next goal. Maybe you've met someone like this. Maybe you're that person. Now, a lot of people look at them and immediately make a judgment. They say this person is obsessed with status, they care too much about success, they need validation. Maybe, but maybe not. What if the thing driving them isn't status at all? What if it's progress? What if moving forward is the thing that gives them meaning? What if growth is how they create certainty in an uncertain world? Suddenly, the behavior looks completely different. Nothing changed. The person didn't change. Only your understanding changed. And once your understanding changes, your ability to influence them changes too. because now you're speaking to what they actually value instead of what you assume they value. Now let's look at another person. Maybe someone in your life avoids conflict at all costs. They want everyone to get along. They try to maintain harmony. They're constantly checking how other people feel. If you're highly independent, this person can drive you crazy. You might think they're too emotional, sensitive, or concerned with pleasing others. But what if that's not the full story? What if connection is simply the thing their mind pays attention to most? If relationships aren't a side issue for them, but the main issue, again, the behavior starts making sense. And this is one of the most important lessons I've learned about influence. Behind almost every behavior is something that person is trying to protect. Sometimes it's progress, sometimes it's certainty, sometimes it's belonging. But almost nobody wakes up in the morning trying to be difficult. Most people are simply protecting something that matters to them. And the moment you see that, everything changes. Because now, you're no longer arguing with behavior. You're looking beneath it. You're trying to understand the need that's creating it. This leads to a question that completely transformed the way I deal with people. Whenever someone frustrates me, I try to stop asking, why are they acting like this? And I start asking, what are they trying to protect? That question changes everything, because suddenly the difficult boss isn't just controlling. Maybe they're protecting stability. The overly ambitious colleague isn't just obsessed. Maybe they're protecting their sense of progress. The defensive partner isn't just stubborn. Maybe they're protecting a wound you cannot see. And whether your interpretation is correct or not isn't even the point. The point is that curiosity creates understanding. Judgment creates resistance. Most people choose judgment. The Stoics chose observation. And that's why they understood something most people never learn. Influence is not the ability to control people. Influence is the ability to understand people so clearly that your words naturally reach them. Think about the people who have influenced you most throughout your life. A teacher, a mentor, a friend, a parent. Whoever it was, they probably had one thing in common. You felt understood by them, you felt seen, you felt like they genuinely understood how you viewed the world. And because of that, you listened. That's the irony. Most people try to earn influence by talking. The Stoic earns influence through understanding. If these ideas help you see people more clearly, consider subscribing. Because that's really what this channel is about. Not controlling life, understanding it, one idea at a time. And that's why people resist you less when they feel understood. They stop defending themselves. They stop preparing counter-arguments. They stop protecting their identity. And for the first time, they're actually listening. The truth is, people rarely resist ideas. People resist feeling misunderstood, feeling judged, controlled. Remove those things and influence becomes far more natural than most people imagine, because you've finally learned how to see people clearly. And that may be the most powerful form of influence there is.